I will be discussing my appreciation of two poems from my poetry primer, in which I have been working on for the past few weeks in IB literature class. The Blackberry Eating by Galway Kinnell is a one-stanza poem consisting of 14 lines, all which are structured in one sentence. As the poem is written in first person, it describes the experience of this process. Immediately, Kinnell introduces the audience by associating the practice of blackberry eating with love in a particular season, autumn, as late September suggests for the time of harvest. It is interesting to indicate that although it may be the time for picking plants, it could also imply the imminence of death, specifically for the plants. This foreshadows what the poet will attempt to illustrate through the next lines of the poem. Yet, the curiousness of the reader when the poet mentions love may be too strong to alter the overall mood by which it associates love to blackberry eating. The audience is then helped to visualize, smell, and feel the fruit through the portrayal of descriptive words such as fat, overripe, and icy. Furthermore, words that describe the eating process are defined by words that are many-lettered and one-syllabled. This leads to the idea that the whole poem may in fact be a simile, by which the poet describes blackberries through the comparison of words. Later, the blending of civilization and human demands to that of the wilderness, as it states, to eat blackberries for breakfast, is another literary technique used by Kinnell. This everyday connection may help the reader engage with the personal experience that the poet is attempting to depict. The poet then shifts away by describing the details and the specifics of the fruit by mentioning how its stalks are very prickly, adding to the reader's sensory experience. But as he delves into the specifications of the fruit, he states that the reason why its stalks are spiky is due to the penalty they earn for knowing the black art of blackberry making. Black art brings up a sense of mystical tone, as the poet provides a further allusion to Adam and Eve's loss of Eden. That, despite the person's satisfaction of eating the fruit, it may have a negative connotation, whatever it may be. The use of imagery techniques, such as the similes described before, as well as certain peculiar words like strengths or squinched, help visually and audibly portray the mystical aspect to eating the blackberries. The alliteration of B's and long E's and the repetition of P in the first four lines, together the S's in the poem, work the lips and the tongue. The most noted are the L's and the S's of line 9, followed by squeeze, squinch, splurge, and then silent, startled, icy. Words that incorporate both energy and surprise into the images they summon. As mentioned earlier, the foreshadowing of the forest in late September may have been inclined to portray exactly this, the death of those who eat the blackberries, as a consequence described by God when consuming the fruit from the forbidden tree. Is a poet describing a personal experience, a dilemma, through the representation of a fruit? What do other readers think?
I like the idea of the poem, but I think there's some problems. I love to go out in late September among the fat, overripe, icy black blackberries. I think the repetition of black blackberries is kind of useless repetition. The adjective black. To eat blackberries for breakfast. Now again, there's a repetition of the word blackberries on these two lines, and I'm not getting. It's not adding anything. Then when I read on the fourth line of the first stanza, the stalks very prickly. I think, wow, I can't think of a better word than prickly. A better word than very. It's pretty boring. If you want to emphasize how prickly something is, do something more interesting than the word very.
It is interesting to notice that some readers, like Lawrence Rubesh, do not find the significance in the writer's choice to add an additional adjective, black, before blackberries for emphasis. Now, some critics may agree with this statement, including me. However, before noting the teacher's appreciation of the poem, I did not take in consideration that it may simply be a criticism of Kinnell's work. As a student, I thought I did not uncover its connotation yet, and so I continually strived to connect something or find use for it. For this reason, I unconsciously avoided myself from believing that it may simply have no use at all. Therefore, the different perspectives or positions of the reader may in fact impact the understanding of a poem's themes and ideas. Another first person poem is The Desert Places by Robert Frost. It utilizes many different techniques, including its style, structure, and language, to emphasize the theme of seclusion, as hinted in its title. In the first stanza, the snow falling onto the field on the ground that is almost covered smooth in snow provides its overwhelmingness over the few weeds and stubble that are showing. Snow in itself being completely one color may incline towards blankness, the color white. This color may be associated with emptiness, coldness, just as a juxtaposition of snow and night does to show this. Yet, it could also depict the characteristics of purity, peace, and innocence. Are those the advantages to being alone? To not be conflicted in the interests and problems of others? In the third stanza, the whiteness is explained with no expression or nothing to express, as the narrator states. The second stanza describes how all animals are smothered in their lairs. The first person narrator seems to be isolated in the deserted landscape. The woods around have it, it is theirs, is what is stated to show the forcing pressure exerted upon the individual, giving a sense of an uneasy mood for the reader. The third person plurals, for example, they, theirs, etc., are used to contrast to the singular first person pronouns, for instance, I, me, and others. This highlights how the narrator is separated from the rest of the nature, which is described as a collective. The shifting of the perspectives of snow to the plants and the animals and finally the human provides a dynamic movement in which the poet utilizes to illustrate the connection between man and nature. The fourth stanza poem extends its structure to depict one of the themes he's trying to portray. The unusual rhyming pattern that Robert Frost had decided to choose, AABC, DDED, FFGF, HHIH, may implicate the loneliness or the separation of the not rhyming lines compared with those that are. The caesuras in themselves, in between each stanza, could also hint towards the loneliness caused by the separation of the text. The fourth stanza shifts the perspective from the field to the stars. He begins to realize how small and insignificant he may be in comparison to the size of the universe, but his loneliness is nowhere compared to the empty spaces between stars, where even no human race is. Thus it seems that he concludes by saying that it is what's inside my mind that scares myself with my own deserted place, or in other words, my loneliness. By looking at the landscape he described before, it is simply empty, not in the sense that it is physically empty, but he believes so because he feels negatively in that way, referring that it may simply be an illusion, that our perspective of a landscape is dependent on our internal thoughts and emotions. This is why he states that I have it in me, indicating the power he has to change his perception of the world.